Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Folkestone, Hythe District and Parish Council's Joint Committee. Please note this meeting is being streamed live to the internet. Please could all members ensure their microphone is set to mute unless they are speaking to reduce any background noise. So we will move on to the first item, which is the appointment of chair. For the purpose of this meeting, members must elect a district councillor to chair the meeting. Can I have a nomination, please?
I nominate Paul Thomas.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder?
Yes, seconded.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, you are elected chair.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, so welcome everybody. So we've completed the first item, appointment of the chair. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you. Just Councillor Burgess has sent apologies.
Okay, thank you. Item 3 is declarations of interest. I don't know if anybody's got any interest they'd like to declare for this evening's agenda items.
Sorry, Paul, going back to there, Councillor Laslett has resigned as a parish councillor at Newington, so he's no longer a member of the committee.
Okay. We'll keep to that. Thank you, Frank. No declarations of interest. So the minutes were sent out and on the agenda pack, they're pages 5 to 8. So to receive the minutes of the meeting from the 12th of September, for those people who've read those, is everybody happy with that?
I think there's an error in there, actually. It says on the election of the chair last time, as there was dissent, the nomination was approved by affirmation of the meeting. Doesn't it mean as there wasn't dissent? There was no dissent.
Probably should. Yes, we can update that.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I don't remember any dissent.
I'll spot it, Mike.
With that amendment, I'm happy to propose.
Thank you very much for that. Indeed, thank you. So we've got a proposal and a seconder for the minutes. So everybody in favour of accepting the minutes with the amendments recommended by Councillor Blakemore?
Thank you. That looks like
take that as a yes for everybody.
Yep.
Next item on the agenda is government reforms to the planning system. You've got a presentation in the pack which came out, so I'll hand over to Adrian now to take us through that. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you. Yes, I'll try and share my screen if I can. And it says the host has disabled screen sharing.
And then it should let you. Okay, if you try it now, it should work.
Hopefully you can see that screen.
Yes.
Yeah, we can see that. Thank you.
Excellent. Right. Well, I gave an update to our district council members on government planning reforms, and one or two suggested it might also be helpful to give us the update to town and parish councillors as well. So hence why I'm on the bill tonight, really. So introduction. Hopefully you can see this slide. Yep, excellent. Right, so looking back through my folders, I realised I'd previously given an update on government planning reforms almost exactly a year ago to this committee, but of course that was a different government and different planning reforms. So when I last gave a presentation, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act had recently got royal assent, and that was the previous government's aims at reform. And the previous government also brought in a lot of changes to national policy in December last year. Since then, of course, we had the general election, and the new government has made a number of announcements and policy proposals regarding planning reform, which I wanted to touch on tonight, really. The new government has said it's minded to continue with the previous government's reforms under the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, and those principally affect local plans. And it's also intending to reverse a lot of the decisions made by the previous government in December last year, and those particularly affect things like housing supply. So to set the scene, almost from the results of the general election onwards, there have been a whole host of announcements and policy proposals coming from the new government. And so only 4 days after the election, a Chancellor of the Exchequer made a speech, and in that speech she made it clear how central planning reform is to the new government's mission, really. And she said in that speech, planning has become a graveyard of economic ambition, and that the new government would grasp the nettle of planning reform. Later that same month, the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, wrote to local authority leaders and chief executives about housing. And she says in that letter to local authorities, you will feel not just a professional responsibility, but a moral obligation to see more homes built and to take tough choices. The same day, the Minister of State wrote to housing industry stakeholders, and in that letter he repeated some of the wording used by the Chancellor, saying that planning, radical and decisive reform of the planning system is needed to improve the productivity of the country and living standards. And those kind of messages have continued over recent months. In October, the Prime Minister addressed the International Investment Summit, and in that speech he spoke about regulation, and he says where it's holding back investment, data centres, warehouses, grid connectors, etc., you name it, then mark my words, we will get rid of it. And then later that same month, the Deputy Prime Minister gave a speech at the Local Government Association conference talking about homelessness, and in that speech she links homelessness very, very closely to planning, and she says Britain needs to speed up the planning system and reintroduce mandatory housing targets. Then most recently in the autumn budget, again, there's a number of references to reform of the planning system and how essential it is in the government's view to deliver 1.5 million new homes. And the autumn budget talks about additional funding for local authorities to recruit additional planners and bring more graduates into the planning sector, and improve the skills of local authorities to deliver the government's agenda. So that's a kind of set the scene of the messages and the sort of policy announcements that have been coming out of government over the last few months since the general election. What's happened so far? Well, there have been kind of 5 main areas that the government has talked about or has put in train. There's been consultation on changes to national planning policy. Alongside that, there was a consultation on changes to housing methodology. The government has said it's minded to increase the fees that local authorities can charge planning applicants when they put in a planning application. And the government has said it's minded to continue with the reforms to the local planning system introduced through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act by the previous government. And there's also been a number of other announcements which have less detail really behind them so far, but the government has talked about reforming planning committees. It's talked about bringing in a new system of strategic plans, and there's a new towns task force which has been set up. So I was just going to talk briefly about each of those 5 areas in turn. So to start off with changes to the national planning policy framework, the government launched a consultation. It was only about 4 weeks after the general election with proposed changes to national policy. And that consultation ran over the summer months and it closed at the end of September. The situation now is that the government is assessing all the consultation comments that they've received. And I had heard that they'd received so many that they were pushing back any changes to early next year. But I did notice in the recent budget, one of the supporting documents says that they will in fact respond to the consultation before the end of the year to confirm pro-growth reforms to the planning system. In summary, what they're proposing to do is to introduce some new text into national policy, and that's principally around things like planning for economic development and renewable energy schemes. But they're also proposing to strip out a lot of changes that were made by the previous government late last year, and those are principally around housing and those changes introduced by the previous government gave more flexibility for local authorities. So by removing them, they are sort of increasing the pressure on us to provide more homes. So looking in a bit more detail at the changes, the previous government had introduced text saying that the housing numbers are an advisory starting point. And that was introduced by Michael Gove at the end of last year. And the new government is proposing to delete that. There were protections for local authorities which have an up-to-date local plan, which we do in Folkestone and Hythe. And we weren't in a position where we had to continually demonstrate an up-to-date supply of housing. But the new government is proposing to remove those protections. Where authorities don't have an up-to-date supply of housing, something called the presumption in favour of sustainable development kicks in, and that basically says that if you get a planning application for housing, then the assumption is you should automatically grant permission unless there are particular reasons why not. And the new government has said that their changes will bring many more local authorities within the scope of this presumption in favour. But in a letter, the Minister of State said that they would introduce some new safeguards, which means that although local authorities would be in a position of releasing many more sites for housing, those sites would nevertheless still need to meet the highest standards that the government expects of development. And there is particular mention in the changes to national policy of the location of development, design and affordable homes. Other changes in the national planning policy framework. There's a new emphasis on the need to provide social homes as part of the affordable housing mix. Previous governments have each introduced new forms of affordable housing in the hope that that would tackle the housing crisis. We've had things like starter homes and first homes, but those tend to be at the higher end of affordability. And so what the new government is doing is introducing much more of a focus on social rent to tackle the housing crisis. There's new text that's introduced into the National Planning Policy Framework about the need to plan for the modern economy, and there's particular reference to laboratories, gigafactories, data centres and digital infrastructure, which the government sees as very important for economic growth. New changes also introduce significant weight to the need to provide new public service infrastructure. And there's a consultation document accompanying the changes, which mentioned in particular health service infrastructure and criminal justice infrastructure. Also, the new government's changes give much more support for planning applications for renewable and low carbon development, and local authorities are told they should give significant weight to the contributions those forms of development can make to a net zero future. And it remains to be seen what that will mean in terms of proposals for wind farms and solar farms. And one of the first things the government did when it came into power was to remove some restrictions on onshore wind. Elsewhere in the National Planning Policy Framework, the changes, the new government has deleted references to beauty and beautiful as part of new developments. Those words were introduced by the previous government, by Michael Gove, the Secretary of State, in late 2023, and they followed the previous government's Building Beautiful Commission. The new government is saying it doesn't mean that we don't want the development to be beautiful, but that they think those terms are subjective and difficult to define. And the new government says that there are mechanisms in place like national design guidance and design codes that can help local authorities achieve good quality development. The changes also introduce a vision-led approach to transport. So that is telling local authorities we've got to move away from kind of a predict and provide approach where we continually assume that traffic will grow and grow, and we plan for the worst case scenario. So it's looking to move away from that and come up with more innovative solutions to traffic and transport. The new changes also introduce additional tests for local authorities to cooperate between each other when they produce their local plans under what's called the duty to cooperate. It is quite a difficult area already, even with the existing text, and especially in a sort of highly constrained area like the southeast of England. And just recently, Oxford City Council have had their local plan thrown out by an inspector on the grounds that they couldn't get agreement with neighbouring authorities as to the approach to housing provision. So even under the existing wording, it's very difficult to get a local plan through the process, and this in effect adds some additional tests for local authorities to meet. The new national policy makes significant changes to the Green Belt policy. And there's been a lot in the national press. You'll have no doubt picked up about this, but thankfully for us, there is no designated Green Belt in Folkestone and Hythe. So that at least is one thing we don't have to worry about. So that is a sort of summary of the new government's recent changes to the National Planning Policy Framework. As I said, they are looking through the comments they had back on the consultation, and they're in the process of deciding what changes to make. and we are told that the final version of the document should be issued by the end of this year. Alongside the changes to the text, the government also proposed other changes to the way that housing targets are calculated. Under the current system, their housing targets are decided nationally through a formula, and each local authority has to try and meet the targets that the methodology churns out. Currently, there are two inputs into that formula. One is the projected growth of households in an area, and the other is housing affordability. And you put those two inputs into the formula and out comes your number. The new government is proposing to change that. And part of the reason for this is they say projections of household growth are themselves based on previous trends. And the previous trends are shaped by a lack of housing. So you are in effect kind of building in an automatic assumption of not meeting housing growth. So the new government is proposing a new methodology, and they would base the housing figures on an automatic increase in the number of homes in an area based on the existing housing stock. And where there are problems with affordability, there will be an automatic uplift for those areas. When you put the new methodology in, when you run the numbers on the new methodology, the national target, that is the number of homes to be provided in England, would increase from just over 305,000 homes a year to 371,000 homes a year. So it's quite a significant increase nationally. And for Folkestone and Hythe, the target would rise from what we have now, which is 735 homes a year, to 838 homes a year. And for context, over the last few years in this district, we've provided around 450 new homes a year. So how difficult would it be to build 370,000 homes a year in England? Well, the best information I've managed to track down, I've found in a research briefing that is published by the House of Commons Library. And this looks at the number of homes that have been built each year over about the last 100 years. And what this chart is showing is the last 100 years with 1923 at the top and 2020 at the bottom. And the dark green colour are the homes that have been built by private sector developers. The lighter green colour towards the bottom of the chart are homes built by charities and housing associations. And the purple colour are homes that have been built directly by local authorities. And you can see it varies greatly from year to year, as you might expect, dropping off to almost nothing during the Second World War. A few caveats about this chart. It's showing the numbers of homes built in England and Wales, and the government's targets only relate to England. And it's also showing the number of new homes, but not the demolitions. So over this period, a number of homes have been demolished, through slum clearance programs and homes destroyed during the war. But you can see that even with those caveats, what a huge job it will be to build more than 370,000 homes a year. And it's only been done once in the last 100 years, as far as I can see, which is around 1968. And in that year, more than 40% of the homes that were built directly by councils. So there has to be a question as to whether the private sector is geared up to provide the number of homes that the government wants to see. So what would the new housing methodology mean for Kent? Well, this shows what the new formula, how the new formula impacts authorities across Kent. I should say this, I've taken this map from a bulletin produced by a planning consultancy called DHA, and they have managed to spell Folkestone wrong, but that's not my doing, I should add. But what this is showing is the increase or decrease from the existing housing targets. And you can see the darker green are those areas which have the highest increases, and that's particularly in West Kent. And that is the Greenbelt authorities of Sevenoaks and Tunbridge Wells, and also Dover. There are some authorities in Kent which would see a slight decrease, and those are the areas shown in red. And then kind of in the middle of the pack, which includes Folkestone and Hythe, are authorities which would see an increase, but not as much as elsewhere. And we are in that pack, and we would see an increase of about 14% in our housing targets. And so could we meet the government's new targets? Well, this chart shows recent housing delivery in Folkestone and Hythe district. The blue bars are showing the number of homes were built over previous years, over about last 15 years. And you can see it varies greatly from year to year, but the overall trend is upwards. And we are building almost twice the number of homes we built, say, 10 years ago. But the government's housing target is now much more, and it's shown by that red dotted line at the top of the graph. And we would have to significantly increase the number of homes we build to get anywhere near meeting that target. So that is kind of a brief overview of the proposed changes to the housing methodology. As with the National Planning Policy Framework, that has been out to consultation, and we don't know what the end result may be, but it clearly shows the direction that the government is going in. Alongside that consultation, there were some other things that the government put forward. The consultation materials acknowledge the lack of resources that local authorities have in terms of determining planning applications and producing local plans. And it is proposed that the planning application fees for householder application would almost double to £528. The new government is saying that won't act as a brake on development, because they say that only represents a very small part of what a householder would be spending on their development, you know, whether it's an extension or whatever it might be. And so the government considers that won't hold back development. They can introduce that fairly quickly, but in the longer term, they are floating the idea of setting planning fees locally. So planning application fees are set nationally at the moment. The new government is proposing, is floating two different methods. They say they could scrap that altogether and let every authority set its own fees, or they could have a sort of basic national fee structure, and allow local authorities to vary that as they can justify it, really. But as I say, that is a longer term prospect because it needs legislation to bring that in. So that's not going to be happening immediately. Local plans. Currently, only a third of local authorities have an up-to-date local plan in place. And that is defined as a plan that was produced within the last 5 years. The new government is keen to increase that, and it's said that its target is to have total universal coverage within this Parliament. And the Deputy Prime Minister has said that she said, "I will not hesitate to use my powers of intervention to drive progress." And the government has a number of means whereby it can step in and take over the plan-making process of a local authority. It has to be said, this kind of statement isn't new, and the previous government did issue many threats of intervention, and last December the previous government issued 7 letters to different local authorities, including Medway Council, threatening them with intervention if they didn't make progress with their local plans. The new government has said it's minded to implement the plan-making system set up by the previous government in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. And they've said they will introduce secondary legislation in summer next year to allow that to begin. What would the new local plan system look like? We don't have much detail, but the previous government, their reforms were focused on having much shorter local plans, which are focused on identifying sites for development. And the previous government has said it would introduce national development management policies, which local authorities shouldn't repeat in their plans. So it's kind of a bit of a centralisation of the system. And local authorities will be given 30-month timetables to prepare their local plans. And there would be involvement of planning inspectors throughout the process rather than at the end, which happens now. And many authorities have learnt right at the end that in the planning inspector's view, their plans have failed. So what are we doing as a local authority? Well, we can't really start on our next local plan until the secondary legislation is in place. As I say, that's in the government has says that will be summer next year. But in the background, we are doing a lot of work so that when the legislation is in place, we can get going quickly. And we have written to parish and town councils recently asking them if they have any sites they want to put forward through our call for sites. Other things that the new government has talked about has been reform of planning committees. Again, and there's not much detail on this, so we don't know exactly what they're thinking of, but there has been a statement saying that they will introduce legislation to modernise planning committees by introducing a national scheme of delegation that focuses the attention of the planning committee on the applications that really matter. As I say, we don't really know what that means, but potentially more planning applications would be going to the officers to determine and fewer to the planning committee. Intriguingly, the new government has also spoken about bringing in universal coverage of strategic plans. These are plans that go beyond the geographical remit of a local authority and look at a much wider area. I was at a it's not really clear what geographies they're looking at here, but I was at a conference a few months back, and there was a civil servant there from the government, and he said it wouldn't mean a return to county council structure plans, but it will mean something else. For those of you with longer memories, you may remember that there was a system of strategic planning in place, a whole array of regional plans, and this authority fell within the southeast region, and we had our housing numbers set by the southeast plan. And the most recent of those was approved in May 2009. But the coalition government came in and it announced that it would get rid of that system, and the Localism Act was introduced in 2011, and there were various legal challenges to the government's decision, but the Southeast Plan was finally abolished in 2013. So for just over a decade, we've had no regional planning framework, but that looks like it is something that will return. And as I said, there's no indication yet of what the geography of this would be, but the government has said it will work with local leaders to develop and test arrangements in the months ahead. So lastly, in this kind of blizzard of announcements and reforms, as new towns, and the government has set up a new towns task force, and this is taken from a press release on the gov.uk website. The New Towns Task Force is chaired by Sir Michael Lyons, and various appointments have been announced to the task force. The task force, it's going to look at large-scale new communities of at least 10,000 homes, and that might be an extension to an existing town or city, or a freestanding new town. There's been a brief policy statement has been published about what they're looking for, and the task force is going to consider the case for new towns, where they might be, and what proposals to concentrate on, how they might be designed and funded, and how they might be delivered. And it's got quite a tight timescale to report, and we understand it's going to be reporting by July next year as to the locations of these new towns. So that's kind of a brief run through of everything that's been happening in the last few months since the general election. So I'll end my slideshow now, and I'm happy to have any questions from people. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Adrian. A very comprehensive overview there. Thank you. So if you could raise your hands either through the reactions button or put your hands up if you've got a question for Adrian, and we'll take them in turn. Okay, Jane?
Yeah, one of the things I'm being quite surprised at when people have talked about the need for provision of a vast number of new homes, which I'm not disputing, but why are not empty buildings, empty homes, empty office blocks, empty shops, empty factories being talked about when it comes to provision of new homes? There's very little discussion, it seems to me, on what can be done to bring empty buildings into a worthwhile use for housing.
Yes, absolutely. It doesn't really feature that much in what I've read so far from the government. Where these things do happen, we include them in our housing supply as homes we've provided. And so, you know, in effect, that's releases the pressure on Greenfield and other sites. Previous governments have introduced a whole range of reforms to try and encourage that. And in effect, some buildings such as office blocks can be turned into homes without the need for planning permission if there are no kind of external alterations. And so previous governments have tried to do that by removing some of these developments from the remit of the planning system. But so far as I'm aware, the new government hasn't made any particular announcements about its plans for that.
Right. Can I just add another question on the same sort of the same issue? When it comes to the call for sites,
yeah,
does this just apply to land, or does it also apply to empty buildings, which could become, you know, which could have a change of use, perhaps?
It could apply to anything. Yes. So we are asking. We sent round messages to developers and landowners and parish and town councils, and yeah, but it's any site. So it it might be a brownfield site that could be demolished and rebuilt, or it could be a conversion, or it could be a greenfield site. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I know New Romney Town Council, we took the call for sites at our full council meeting on Monday, and we've made some representation. But interestingly, Jane, at the planning committee on Tuesday, we actually considered the reuse of a building in Guildhall Street, on the corner of Guildhall Street, with some decorative work to be done and an extension to that as well. So I think that, you know, there certainly seems to be the demand there from developers to be able to take buildings and to put them from a commercial to a residential use, as demonstrated there. So thank you for your questions.
Great, thank you.
Next, for the next. Your video's off and you're muted, Anne. Okay. In which case, we'll take Frank. Can we have your question, Frank?
Thanks,
so you're muted as well, Frank.
Sorry, I thought I clicked it on. But with all of this, is where does Otterpool fit? Because it seems at the moment it's been totally stalled for one reason or another. I have read somewhere, I can't remember where it was, something about the fact of trying to get it all to be net zero is pushing the price of the houses up and making it less viable as a concept as well. That was originally going to be the place where the folks and needs were going to be met.
Yeah, I can't give you much information on Otterpool as I'm not that close to the project, but in the previous local plan, it accounted for about 40% of all the housing that the district would deliver. We have contacted agents for Otterpool Park as part of our call for sites, and I have had some conversations with them, so they will be putting forward that site as part of this new process, and hopefully they will provide information as part of their submission as to when they think the site will come forward, and you know, how many homes it will provide over you know, the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So yeah.
It's definitely still proceeding, Otterpool, just proceeding a bit more slowly than we would like, and definitely with the aspiration of it being as close to net zero as we can get it.
Thank you, Frank. Anne, you were next up. Don't forget to take your question for Adrian, please.
Yeah, I've got three actually, and I'm so sorry I dropped out of the last question. Frank, was it Frank who was speaking? So anyway, I hope I'm not repeating the question. So obviously the first one is 14% of the increase in housing targets. I'm assuming Otterpool is part of that increase, or is it not? That's the first question. I can go on to the other two for quickness sake.
The increase in targets is sort of targets that are coming down to us from government, and it's up to us as a district to show how we intend to meet that target. Otterpool will be part of it, but it certainly can't satisfy all of that targets, and we would need to find sites from elsewhere. But
so anything else will be in addition. That was all. I didn't know if you know.
Yeah.
In addition, it's a simple question, but yeah. The other thing is that my background is health, and obviously health estates, and I'm quite keen that district councils are fully articulate around the centre coming down with things like diagnostic centres. So if you look at Otterpool, the primary care, the GPs and the primary care networks are quite keen on a diagnostic centre, and it could be that West Streeting and the centre thinks it could be, because we're already a little bit down from that development, it might be a really good site to have something like a development centre which have a massively positive impact on the health of the population locally, because that leaves the hospitals to do treatment, not prevention and not diagnostic. However, I'm not sure who health estates listen to. Perhaps you can clarify for me, because you've got the integrated care board, you've got the acute trusts, foundation trusts, and then you've got the primary care networks. And it strikes me that there needs to be, the district council need to almost decide who they dovetail into around decision making and putting pressure points on. And I'm not sure how that happens at a district council level when you're looking at, you know, Kent-wide integrated care board estates management. So there's something there about how is there a flavour of district council putting pressure on what health estates they want to see development, because we obviously don't want GP practices to be developed with no GPs, but we do want something like a diagnostic centre to be developed, which would be very helpful to the local people. So I'm not sure how we dovetail into that planning that comes down nationally via huge bodies like integrated care boards, and how does the district council side or not side with primary care networks, etc.
Yeah, I'm not closely involved in those discussions, but as part of the local plan, we're at the very earliest stages at the moment, and as I said, we can't really begin formally until summer next year when the legislation comes in. But we do speak to health representatives as part of that process, and for the call for sites, we have contacted the health bodies we have been in previous discussions with, and we've said to them, you know, do you what sites would you like to see, and you know, have you got old sites that you want to dispose of? So we are having those conversations, and I think separately the developers for Otterpool Park are having conversations with health bodies. So
well, I think we'd be incredibly naive, and we'd miss an opportunity if we weren't, as a district council with parish councils, having a very firm view of whether we side with the primary care priorities, or we are subject to very large complex organisations such as foundation trusts and the integrated care board. And I think if we're not careful, we could be in a position, through talking to people we've always talked to and done it the same way, be in a position where we're not effectively for our tiny parish council communities and our district council communities doing the best for the well-being and health population. So I just have some concerns about that.
I think it's possibly, obviously it's not my portfolio, it's Jim's as well as being leader. It's possibly not what we're talking about now with planning. It's an issue probably specific to Otterpool that is for another time perhaps to get into, and we're maybe not even at that stage quite with Otterpool in any case. But I know it is a thing that comes up regularly about Otterpool and what the demands on the local health service are going to be, and not least how will the William Harvey cope with having an extra 8,000 homes just down the road from it. So it's a real genuine concern for a lot of people.
Yeah. So I'm just flagging it up now. If it's incorrect,
absolutely. And I think
I'm sorry.
I think it's a really valid thing to raise, and it's quite a difficult one for us to answer as a council, because of course we don't, as Adrian knows from having dealt with the NHS over Folker and the medical centre there.
Yeah,
we're in their hands to a large extent. Much as we would like to put pressure on them to do things, ultimately it's their decision, not ours, isn't it?
Well, I don't know how effective we are on the integrated care board.
I'll
come back to that.
Question from...
I've got a third question.
Can I? I'll take Jane in a moment, but one more thing, if I may. Certainly on Romney Marsh, we have the Integrated Neighbourhood Team Working Group, Anne, and as part of that, one of the streams that they've been operating is looking at facilities and what's around. So what's the need against what's the availability of facilities, and they've certainly identified where the gaps are, and then where those gaps should be filled. And certainly through the discussion we had at New Romney Town Council, I can't tell you about other councils.
That's very helpful. Yeah. That's very helpful, because I think it's always better to anticipation.
We've made that a particular focus. And Peter, well, the thing is, on that board, we have the Kent County Council member, we have town council members and district council members as well. So there's a good representation across the whole suite of local members feeding into that particular integrated neighbourhood team, Anne, actually.
Okay, so that's my naivety not knowing about that.
Jane.
Yeah, following on from what Anne and
well, there
Paul
should be one for the Downs. Sorry.
Following on from what Anne and Paul have just said, when I was at the last meeting of the Shepway district, parish and town councils, we were talking about health, and there are a number of initiatives that are going on in various places. And I just felt those meetings seem to me to be very poorly attended by, and many councils don't send representatives to those meetings. And I feel that it's an ideal forum for sharing information, as you've just been saying, Paul, and listening to other people, as I say, in different parishes. You can see that there is stuff going on, but it feels very piecemeal. And if we could get together and talk about, as you've said, needs and facilities that we already have, then maybe we can actually make a plan along what we need in the whole of the district, but make sure that there is stuff going on, sharing and collaborating together to try and improve what we've got. But with a small attendance at those parish council those Shepway meetings, it feels very difficult to get anything going on a larger scale across the district. Sorry, I know this isn't really planning, but I just feel it's very important that we kind of increase the number of people who come along to those meetings. Thank you.
Okay. I think your point's well made, Jane, actually. Thank you very much. And are there any other questions for Adrian? No? Okay. And keeping us all up to speed. I mean, it's great because planning is often one of those things that we're contacted about more than probably anything else, I would imagine, these days. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate that. We do have one more item on the agenda, agenda item 6, which is future meeting times. So the background to this is that we've had a request from a member that the committee asked to discuss whether to move future meetings of the district and parish joint committee to 7 p.m. or keep the existing time. So as the group who are here now are the ones who regularly attend, I'll put it to you to say, do you want to move to 7 o'clock or do you want to keep it at 6 p.m.? And I'll just take a straw poll and we'll take it from there, actually, if you're okay with that. So any comments, first of all, Peter?
Yeah, 6 o'clock for me. I think it is much better time. It enables the district people to continue their work day on into it without having to go away and then come back again. So I would go for the 6 o'clock personally.
Okay, thank you. Graham?
6 o'clock for me.
Okay. Jane?
Yeah, I think 6 o'clock is quite a good time, and you know, I tend to yes, it allows people to get to other meetings that might be starting a bit later. So yeah, I think 6.
Okay. Thank you. Anne?
Yep, 6 o'clock for me, please.
Okay. Mike?
I'm happy either way. 6 o'clock suits me, but don't mind either way.
Okay. So I think we've asked those who regularly attend. So I think on that basis, I just got Frank. Yep.
Yeah, I'm free either way, but if we stick at 6 o'clock, then we're going to have to change at least one member of the committee. So we'll have to sort that out at our next meeting. We've got to have a new one anyway.
But I think the majority. Yes, sir.
We've got to
sorry,
have
Frank.
one new one anyway because of the resignation. So.
Okay. Well, I think the feeling around the table is we'll keep it at 6 o'clock, and how about if we review it in a couple of meetings' time and see how we get on, if that's okay. Can we minute that to say that we've got we'll keep it as it is at this moment in time at 6, and we'll review it. We'll review it in 2025.
Yes, no problem. Can I just have a proposer and a seconder?
Table nods. Yes, his thumbs up. That'll be fine.
Could I have a proposer and seconder to keep the time?
Thank you. Thank you for your questions. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I do apologise. So we've got Peter's proposing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that Graham seconding?
Second, yeah.
Thanks very much.
And so all those in favour, then, if you could indicate, and we can just say that we had a vote on it. So that's.
Okay. I think we'll review it next year.
And we'll review it next year. Yes. Okay. Great stuff. Thank you for that. Yes, Frank.
You're on mute, Frank.
You're on mute.
It didn't want to unmute. We've been trying for, and as Alex knows, and his predecessor before that, we've been trying to get the planning forum meetings going again. They're having a great deal of resistance, it appears, because nothing has ever happened from the planning department.
Yes, I understood that they may be looking to bring them back, but I haven't heard any more. That was a few weeks ago, so I can follow it up, but I believe something was happening. It may have been delayed due to the new reforms, but I can try and get an update on that for you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, could we put that as a note at the end of the minutes to say that the question has been raised about the planning forum, please? Is that okay? And then we've captured it as part of this meeting. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so I'll make it 7 o'clock. In fact, it's a minute past 7. So thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you very much, Adrian, and have a good evening. And we'll catch you again in a few weeks' time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.